Okay, we're live. So anyway, it's good to be back live. Last week we kind of had an in-house session, just me and Larry, and talked about some of the work going on in the church and everything. But it's been a good start of the year. This is the time of colds, sickness, flu, and other things, and so. And yesterday was extremely cold for some of the elderly that uh, it's difficult for them sometimes, and so it's understandable that uh, crowd wasn't bad. It just wasn't what a typical crowd would be with some of the sickness. Even I know Haley had a stomach bug, and different things going around this time of year. Let me see. My audio's a little low. Pressure, noise gate. Huh, I don't have a gain on there. Oh, okay. Go. Let me move that up to okay. Let's see that helped. Yeah, looked like it helped some. But anyway, it so we're starting off good. We're using a program to keep track of attendance, and so uh, next week, after next week, we'll kind of do some observations. I need to add a lot of notes because I know a lot of people were either out of town or sick yesterday, and so I need to add that. It's only as good as all the data in it that you can easily see. So, there's some people that have missed 2 Sundays in a row, but they've been sick or they've been out of town, different things. So, but then there are others that we kind of need to start checking on. Some we know that they're sick, but we still need to check on them and see. And so we'll use that as a tool. Next Sunday will be our potluck. So if you're in the Boonville area, come church at Heritage Addiction next Sunday, and we'll treat you to a meal. Uh, so I imagine you'll bring your spinach dip, won't you?
I'll bring it, and I'm also going to bring those Hawaiian rolls
Rolls. Oh,
with
yum.
cheese and
Yeah.
slice of meat. And
There you go.
they
So
were delicious.
well, so you heard it. You need to come. But anyway, we're making a point to try to invite people for the uh, potluck days. And so we have 10 a year usually. We don't generally have one in November and December for the holidays, but we will have 10 of them. And this is the first one of the year. So we're trying to do that after the success we had at the 60th anniversary homecoming. But anyway, today we're going to be studying from 2 Samuel 6. Get my Bible here, although it's more extra. I've got,
Second Samuel.
excuse me, Second Kings. I was just checking to see if he's listening, Dale. Uh,
Well, you know, I'm hard of hearing.
you heard that. So there you go. So I'm speaking good volume. So anyway, uh, we're still in the midst of all that Elisha does. I'm just going to remind you who the king is. The king is Jehoram. Some translations call him Joram. Uh, what gets a little confusing is at the same time, we're going to get back to in the next week or so, get back to Judah. We've been kind of stuck on Israel for a while because that's where all the stuff is really going on with Elijah, then Elisha. But we're going to get back to Judah soon. And Judah's going to have a king that overlaps with the king of Israel, and they have the same name. So it's number 1823 on your in your Thompson Chain reference. It has a list of all the kings of Israel, so you can always go to that, and you can see who the king was. So you see on the kings of Israel, which is the northern kingdom, you go to uh, you had Ahab, Jehoram. It also says Joram. Now that's the way the King James translated it. In 2 Kings 1 translations will use Jehoram. But then if you go to the kings of Judah, 1823, and you come down to after Jehoshaphat, uh, which is going to die during the time of the Jehoram of Israel. You also have another Jehoram that's going to be the king of Judah. So just understand different kings, but uh, same time period. So it does get confusing, but names are common everywhere. And so we're going to get into uh, Elisha and what he does in chapter 6. Uh, really quite interesting what takes place in chapter 6. Uh, However, before we go to chapter 6, we're going to jump ahead because there is something. Now, the Crockett harmony of the kings in Israel, Samuel, Kings, and Chronicles, it puts it in a chronological order, and it places Second Kings 8, 1 and 2 as the next thing in line, and we're going to see why it does that. And it's really not that it's behind, it's just that it alludes to something that's not revealed in the, if you're just reading straight through. So Second Kings 8:1. Let me check, make sure this is up on screen for the audience. Yeah, look there. I did good. So Second Kings 8:1 says, Now Elisha had said to the woman whose son he had restored to life, Arise and depart with your household and sojourn wherever you can, for the Lord has called for a famine, and it will come upon the land for 7 years. So the woman arose and did according to the word of the man of God, and she went with her household and sojourned in the land of the Philistines 7 years. Now, this famine of 7 years uh, goes back into, because the next verse, in verse 3, it talks about the end of the 7 years. So if you back up 7 years, what we're reading in 2 Samuel 6 is during this famine time. So I just want to point that out because it will have some bearing. Famines back in days like that, it was really scary times. I know when we first moved to uh, Boonville 11 years ago, y'all were in a drought situation, and it had been a drought for a few years. And about the time we moved here, we obviously brought some good stuff, good luck, because it started raining like normal again. And so, very quickly, probably within that first year, we were back into somewhat normal. The way they calculated, though, it took another year or two before they officially said we weren't in drought anymore. But, a drought is devastating to farmers. But could you imagine where you don't have trucking and other transportation ways to get food to areas that are having issues? In fact, you go to the supermarket, very little of the produce you get in most of our supermarkets, unless you go to a farmer's market. You go to a supermarket, most of that produce doesn't come from Arkansas. It comes from California. It comes from Florida. It comes from Mexico. It comes from Texas. And So, that's just the way it is because we can't grow everything here. If we want to have, if you want to have avocados in Arkansas, they're not going to be from Arkansas. They're going to be from California or Mexico. That's just the way it is. And so a lot of things are like that. But back in the day, you just had literally what you had. So if you couldn't grow it there, you didn't have hardly anything. And so can you imagine for 7 years being in a famine and a drought where you had nothing? It was very difficult for the average person. So Elisha tells this woman. You remember the woman who, uh, she built this little place for him to stay on the roof of her house, and he wanted to give her something. So Gehazi, his servant at the time, said, "Well, she doesn't have a son, and her husband's old, so she had a son the next year, and then he dies, and out in the field, and she lays him up in his room, and she rushes to see Elisha, and he comes back and he resurrects the boy from life. So this family here, Elisha tells them, y'all need to go out to this area. It's we're going to be in a severe famine for 7 years. And so apparently she returns at the end of the 7 years. Uh, so 2 Kings 6:1 doesn't necessarily relate to this, but it's an interesting story. Just shows how powerful these prophets like Elijah and Elisha were. Now the sons of the prophets said to Elisha, "See, the place where we dwell under your charge is too small for us. Let us go to the Jordan and each there get a log and let's make a place for us to dwell." And he answered, "Go." So they, it's getting too small. They had too many, and so they're going to expand. Then one of them said, "Be pleased to go with your servants." And he answered, "I will go." So he went with them, and when they came to the Jordan, they cut down trees. Okay, so apparently the trees were good there, and probably the suitable material to uh, build with. Uh, Says in verse 5, though, so, but as one of was felling a log, his axe head fell into the water, and he cried out, "Alas, my master, it was borrowed." Now, uh, it probably means a little bit more than just borrowed. If you go to your neighbor and borrow something, that's one thing. But today, if you had to have a tool, I'm talking about a specialized tool. Even like when we had the lift thing in the auditorium to do certain things to work on the projectors and the speaker, kind of raise them up some, and what did we do? We went to We went to Hug All. We rented one. Well, what would they have done if we didn't return it?
Sent you the bill.
Sent you a bill. Well, what if you didn't pay the bill?
Get you.
They'd come.
Police
Yeah, they would have come after you. Yeah, and it wouldn't have been good. Or if you had done a lot of damage to it that was more than just random use, they wouldn't have been too happy. So this is probably something like that. Somebody probably made a small amount of money, probably loaning out equipment, and you probably paid a small. Anyway, it was borrowed. They didn't have their own axe. They didn't have money for their own axe, and so they went. I don't know what a prophet would need an axe for, but I guess everybody could use one. So he was really troubled. It fell into the water, the Jordan. Jordan's not a huge river, but it's a good sized river. It's trying to think of a river near here that would be similar size. Um, there's places the Pettit Gene, but not here. On down you get into where it'd probably be a similar size once you get on to like closer to the Morrilton area. But anyway, so if it, well, let's just use Blue Mountain Lake. If you is out there and all of a sudden your axe head fell into Blue Mountain Lake, what's your odds of finding that axe head? Especially if it's say near the dam when they was letting it loose, What's your
not very good.
Not very good. So especially a river, it just wouldn't be much luck, of finding that axe head. So the man of God, that's Elisha, says, "Where did it fall?" When he showed him the place, he cut off a stick and threw it in there and made the iron float. Now, does iron float? Not normally. It's got way too much of a specific gravity. It's just going to sink. And he said, "Take it up." And he reached out in his hand and he took it. So, a really amazing feat. Once again, he just took the stick and he somehow, God did it. But anyway, made the axe head rise. When I was an engineering student, civil engineer, American Society of Engineering, they have these competitions with uh, fellow schools, that are part of the American Society of Civil Engineering. And the biggest component, they do this balsa wood bridge contest where you build a bridge out of balsa wood, and the one that wins is you got restrictions on how much you can weigh and other things. The one that wins is the one that they start putting weights on it, and the bridge holds up with the strongest weight before it crushes. Of course, balsa wood is very light, very breakable. So, it takes a lot of effort to just get it to where, how it could be strong. But the biggest competition was what they labeled as the concrete canoe race. Now, I don't like the odds of being in a concrete boat. It just doesn't sound like that's going to be the good idea. But you can use different additives and other things to make the concrete. It's not as strong as it would be if you had like a heavy rock, but it is concrete. And there's ways to make it to where, if you design it right and everything, it will float. Um, we always did good, especially our girls. We had some athletic girls, and they actually sometimes would win their race. They would, but our boat, it wasn't that our boat was that great. It's just that we had more athletic girls than some of the other teams. Our guys never won. Um, but anyway, uh, University of Alabama Huntsville, they won back in my day every year. And the reason they won is because adjacent to the campus is NASA in Huntsville, and they had NASA engineers that would model them space age look, and they had these stuff that you could put in or over the concrete that would make it more uh, fluid in water, and it didn't look like like our concrete canoes. They looked like a canoe made out of concrete. Their canoe looked like some type of rocket ship. I mean, it was just space age. So it was just totally different. One year it was in Nashville. It was at Vanderbilt University was hosting it, and so they're in the Cumberland River, which is a good sized river. It's much like the Arkansas River, and so they're racing there in Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt kind of sometimes a little smoother than they should be, thinking higher of themselves. And so they get there. You'd have a girls' race, a boys' race, and a faculty race. And so the faculty get in the boat and they're starting to row it. And I don't know what happened, but all of a sudden that boat started taking water and it sunk like a rock. And everybody cheered because no one liked Vanderbilt in those organizations. So anyway, but metal and iron axe head is just going to drop to the bottom. So once again, this is an amazing miracle. Okay, let's get to verse 8 now. The horses and chariots of fire. Uh, you're probably familiar with this passage, even if you don't think you are. You've probably heard something about this. Once, when the king of Syria was warned against Israel, he took counsel with his servants, saying, "At such and such place excuse me, shall be my camp." But the man of God sent word to the king of Israel, "Beware that you do not pass this place, for the Syrians are going down there." Now, how did the man of God know this? Did he have spies that he sent out? So, how did he know the king of Syria was coming in? God warned him. Okay. Now, this is most likely Ben Hadad, as we'll see later on in the chapter. King of Syria. Mighty army, vastly superior to Israel. They'd kind of, Israel had kind of been this subservient role for Syria a while. So whatever took the king's fancy of Syria, he decided he's just going to take it over, Israel. And so Elisha says to Jehoram, "Don't go down there. The king of Syria is coming." The king of Israel sent to the place about which the man of God told him. Thus he used to warn him, so that he saved himself there more than once or twice. And the mind of the king of Syria was greatly troubled because of this thing. And he called his servants and said to them, "Will you not show me who of us is for the king of Syria?" So he's like, who gave him this information? And one of the servants said, "None, my lord, O king, but Elisha the prophet, who is in Israel, tells the king of Israel the words that you speak in your bedroom." So God revealed to Elijah these secret things. And he said, "Go and see where he is, that I may send and seize him." It was told him, "Behold, he is in Dothan." So uh, King Syria is like, "Well, how did he know?" And he said, "Well, this man of God, he tells him what you even do and say in your bedroom." And he's like, "Well, I know what to do. I'll just go seize him. That way he can't tell the king any secrets anymore." Not realizing how amazing it was, that how in the world can he do that unless it be power of God? And so he doesn't really understand what he's dealing with. Uh, so he sent their horses and chariots and a great army, and they came by night and surrounded the city. Now, that would be probably a scary premise. Dothan was not a big place, and needless to say, there was nothing military of value there. But to see this chariots and horses, it'd be like if all of a sudden there was a army from, say, China, and they surrounded Boonville. Well, that'd be a scary sight. But not only would it be a scary sight, you'd be like, why are they here? What are they after? Um, uh, So when the servant of the man of God rose early in the morning and went out, behold, an army of horses and chariots were all around the city. And the servant said, Alas, my master, what shall we do? He said, Do not be afraid, for those who are with us, and this is what you've probably read and heard many times, those who are with us are more than those who are with them. Now, that took some faith, and that servant probably sees all these horses and chariots. And he told Elisha about it, and Elisha says, Don't worry, we've got more than they do. And he's probably looking at Elisha and maybe the others of his household. And he's like, Okay, Elisha. Um, and so, he's, I'm sure he's a little shaken, and he's like, Well, I know Elisha's done a lot of things, but I don't know about this. Then Elisha prayed and said, Oh Lord, please open his eyes that he may see. So the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. Now, these are heavenly horses and chariots. These are angelic beings, obviously, and there was a lot more of them than there were of these human soldiers, and they were a lot more powerful. So I think this is kind of Elisha that he prayed that the servant may see what he could see. And so he's like, Oh, I know what you mean, Elisha. And when the Syrians came down against him, Elisha prayed to the Lord and said, Please strike this people with blindness. So he struck them in blindness in accordance with the prayer of Elisha. Now, a lot of times people talk about the God of the Old Testament. He's a vengeful, wrathful, killing people and doing all this, women, children, everything. But you notice Elisha didn't pray that they be killed, did he? Sometimes there's more things important than just winning a battle. And so what God really wanted here was for the Syrians to understand the power of God. And so Elisha prayed to strike them down blindness, so he struck them down with blindness in accordance to prayer of Elisha. Elisha said to him, This is not the way, and this is not the city. Follow me. Now, how would they know differently? They wouldn't. They were blind. And so this guy comes out and says, This isn't the way, and this isn't the city. Follow me. Kind of like if you've ever seen the original Star Wars movie where he comes out and he tells those outside that cantina they're at, and he says, These are not the soldiers you're looking for. The men you're looking for. Okay. But anyway, so Elisha basically says, Follow me, and I'll bring you to the man whom you seek. Well, they sought him, but they had no way of knowing this. And he led them to Samaria. Now, what's in Samaria? What was Samaria the capital of? Israel. So who lived in Samaria?
Jews.
Well, yeah. Specifically, who was there in a big palace? King. And the army was headquartered there. So basically, he was walking them into, instead of a prophet who likely had no weapons and was not, in earthly standards, considered to be a dangerous person, to the belly of the beast, you might say. As soon as they entered Samaria, Elisha said, O Lord, open the eyes of these men that they may see. So the Lord opened their eyes, and they saw, and behold, they were in the midst of Samaria. Now, what do you think they thought at this time? They were like, oh, As soon as they entered Samaria, as soon as the king of Israel saw them, he said to Elijah, "My father, shall I strike them down? Shall I strike?" There they are. They're all there. They're kind of dumbfounded by all this, and the king's like, "Well, what do I do, Elisha? Do we kill them now?" And he answered, "You shall not strike them down. Would you strike down those whom you have taken captive with your sword and with your bow? Set bread and water before them, that they may eat and drink and go to their master." So he prepared for them a great feast. And when they had eaten and drunk, he sent them away. And they went to their master. And the Syrians did not come again on raids into the land of Israel. So, um, then why wouldn't they come again? They learned their lesson. Yeah. Yeah, it didn't matter how powerful they were. If there is an entity that can blind you and lead you into the hands, and then they didn't kill you, there was an act of mercy there. And so, uh, just a humorous thing. You know, these were real events. So I wonder how Elisha kept a straight face. Of course, it didn't matter if his face was straight, but I would have been laughing, at these people following me, the one they came for, right into the land of the city of Samaria, where they were, uh, you know, uh, overmatched because they didn't send the whole army. They only sent enough that they sent a lot of people, but they really didn't think they would need the whole army to get Elisha. And now they're in the belly of the beast. Yeah, it would have been tough to keep not be smirking and laughing at this whole thing as they were following you, who they were originally out to get. Okay, afterward. Well, we don't know long how afterward. It doesn't say, does it? But we're still in the famine. Okay, so it's during this 7 year stretch. Ben-Hadad, king of Syria, mustered his entire army and went up and besieged Samaria. So this is a later time. So, that first part, they didn't do it, but it may have been years later. And so Ben-Hadad decided that he wouldn't on that campaign, and he didn't see it personally. So he mustered his entire army this time, and he sent him to besiege Samaria. And there was a great famine in Samaria. Now, once again, if you're just reading this, you think, well, what connection is that? But that's why you go forward to chapter 8 and you find out that Elisha had said there's going to be a great famine for 7 years. So it's still during this time. As they besiege it, until a donkey's head was sold for 80. As they besieged it, until a donkey's head was sold for 80 shekels of silver, and fourth part of a cob of dove's dung for 5 shekels of silver. Now, as the king of Israel was passing by the wall, a woman cried out to him, saying, "Help, my lord, O king." And he said, "If the Lord will not help you, how shall I help you?" I almost think this is kind of tongue in cheek from the king of Israel, because he wasn't really he was by no means a righteous person. This woman said to me, "Give me your son, that we may eat him today, and we'll eat my son tomorrow." Now, how depraved people get when they become fearful for their lives. There are stories like this throughout history where people are in severe no food for long term, and they do depraved things. And here we see uh, how horrific it is. And so this woman says, "I'll tell you what, we'll make a deal. Give me your son today, and we'll eat him today, and then tomorrow we'll eat mine." Uh, just horrific. And I can't imagine this, because I would never. There are some things you say, well, you can't really say it unless you've been there, but this is something I would never do. Uh, and it gets to the point, when we start devaluing life, and so many people have devalued life, from abortions to things like, euthanasia for older people. And, life is God given, it's sacred, it comes from God. And it's not our right to take life in a situation like this. Um, so we boiled my son and ate him. On the next day I said, give your son, that we may eat him, but she has hidden her son. Well, she's a lot smarter than the other one. still horrific and inhumane. But I'm not sure what she wants the king to do. But so when the king heard the words of the woman, he tore his clothes. Now, as he's passed the wall, and the people looked, and behold, he had sackcloth beneath his body. So, why did this bother the king so much? Like I say, he's not really a righteous person. But why did it bother him so much? I mean, what kind of kingdom do you have when your constituencies are eating their own children? I mean, that is just horrific. And ultimately, the king is usually the one responsible for making sure that people are fed and secure and other things. And so, you know, I think there are certain levels of people that, you know, people react to tragedy like this. And so it says, and he was passing the wall, and people saw this. But just to point out that this guy is not a righteous person, guess what he says the next thing? And he said, may God do so to me, and more also, if the head of Elisha, the son of Shaphat, remains on his shoulders today. So who's he blaming? The man of God. He's blaming Elisha. Can't do nothing about God, but he can kill Elisha. And so, like I say, this prophecy that Elisha said probably did get trickled down that he's the one that said it's going to happen. So Elisha was sitting in his house, and the elders were sitting with him. Now the king was had dispatched a man from his presence, but before the messenger arrived, Elisha said to the elders, "Do you see how this murderer has sent to take off my head?" He's talking about the king. "Look, when the messenger comes, shut the door and hold the door fast against him. Is not the sound of his master's feet behind him?" And while he was still speaking with them, the messenger came down to him and said, "The trouble is from the Lord. Why should I wait for the Lord any longer?" And so now we get to chapter 7. So we'll turn to chapter 7. But Elisha said, "Hear the word of the Lord. Thus says the Lord. Tomorrow about this time, a seah of fine flour will be sold for a shekel, and 2 seahs of flour of barley for a shekel at the gate of Samaria." Then the captain on whose hand the king leaned said to the man of God, "If the Lord himself should make windows in heaven, could this thing be?" But he said, "You shall see it with your own eyes, but you shall not eat of it." Okay, let's break this down before we see some of this. So it told us at the beginning, as they besieged it, till a donkey's head was sold for 80 shekels, 4 part of cob of dove's dung, 5 shekels silver. So things had went up. So, what happens when, even like say, and I don't think it got down that far, but I know parts of Florida got snow yesterday. It was the northern part. It was in the, Pensacola and that type area. But, it's probably gone by today already. But there are times that you get freezes down to central Florida, and it can be severe every maybe 10, 15 years. Well, what's in central Florida? What fruit is there that a lot of people like? Especially you squeeze it up, put it in a jug, and drink it.
Oranges. I'm guessing oranges.
Oranges, yeah, that's the orange. Yeah, that's Orange Grove Central. And so especially in our area, we probably get as more oranges from Florida than we do anywhere else. Now, there's another place that makes a lot of oranges, and that's California. But what happens if there's a big freeze in Florida and it kills that orange crop for the year? What happens to the price? It goes way up. Yeah, it goes way up because you've got less supply now to meet the demand. And so you can imagine an area that's drought full, you don't have homegrown stuff. So they're having to bring it in from outside places. Well, you got the transportation cost. I mean, you'd even have today, but you can imagine how expensive things were starting to get. 7 years of this, so everything they ate or consumed or bought was having to be brought in. And you're not talking about, even though you might have places, what we'd think of relatively close, it wasn't relatively close for them. So it was a major undertaking to bring in goods and services. And so you're talking about a lot of expense. So things were expensive. And so Elisha says to this guy that came to get him so that the king cut his head off, uh, he says, by the way, that was not a way in the law of Moses to execute somebody, was it? There's different things. You could stone them to death and do these other things, but there wasn't anything about cutting their head off. This came from the surrounding nations, these idol worshippers and pagans. So this shows once again who has influenced this king. But Elisha said, he said, tomorrow see a flour of beef for a shekel, and 2 seahs barley for a shekel, and how in the world is it going to be that cheap? We've had this famine, and it costs so much to bring it in. And how is it going to be so cheap in Samaria? And so the guy that was there, he said, if the Lord himself opened up windows from heaven, it wouldn't be able to drive the price down that much that quick. Well, what do you think about when Elisha says, you shall see it with your own eyes, but shall not eat of it? Is that good news for this captain of the guard? No. Something nefarious is going to happen to this captain of the guard. You're going to see it.
Not sounding good.
He won't get to eat it, though. So we'll see what it happens. So anyway, we keep on going. So now there were 4 men who were lepers. I love this account because, okay, so as lepers, what they were somewhat ostracized. They weren't allowed into certain, most city gates. They weren't allowed, and they had to beg for everything. Well, how's the begging going to go when the country's in a drought and there's nothing? It's not going to go. What people are scrounging for themselves. They're not going to be generous enough and have anything extra to, head out to lepers. So these lepers were struggling. Not only do they have this leprosy that's horrific, but, what can they do? So there were 4 men who were lepers at the entrance of the gate because they couldn't go in. And they said to one another, why are we sitting here until we die? If we say, let us enter the city, the famine is in the city, we shall die there. It ain't going to do us any good to go to the city. There's nothing there for us. And if we sit here, we die also. So now, come, let us go over to the camp of the Syrians. If they spare our lives, we shall live. If they kill us, we shall but die. So the Syrians the entire army had been, encamped, and they were heading their way to Samaria to take it over. And so these lepers, they're not doing very well. We could go into the city. Of course, they'd kick us out, might kill us, but there ain't nothing in the city, even if we went in there and they didn't kick us out. No food there. So, Syrians are just up the road encamped. We'll go over there. Well, if they spare lives, we live because they got food. But if they don't spare lives, we're going to die anyway. So, nothing to lose. So that's what these 4 lepers do. So they rose at twilight to go to the camp of the Syrians. What is twilight? Okay, yeah, it's close to that time. It's still light. In fact, that's when they were to kill the Passover lamb on was it Nisan the 15th, whatever. By the way, one thing that we sometimes, I was talking to somebody that is Jewish about this, or is of the Jewish religion. We don't tell this right sometimes. So, although they would kill the lamb, they didn't eat it till that night. So it was now the 16th. And so, we talk about the Passover meal, we talk about the Passover the night before, but that night before was already the first day, or first, because the days were measured sundown to sun up, or sundown to sundown. So what happens is that Passover week begins. So eating the lamb or eating the sacrifice is part of the Passover meal, and it's part of the feast of the unleavened bread. So it actually works out. But anyway, so twilight, somewhere later in the afternoon, anywhere probably between 3 and 6, and so they're going there. It's still daylight, so you can see, um, and so they rose, went there. But when they came to the edge of the camp of the Syrians, behold, there was none there. Now, that's kind of an odd thing, is it not? Here's this army going to go in and take siege of Samaria, and they go there, and the camp's still there, but no one is there. And for the Lord had made the army once again. The Syrians, their mistake was they didn't think there's no way these Israel could withstand their might, but that's not who they had to worry about. So the army, the Syrians, hear the Lord made the army of the Syrians hear the sound of chariots and horses, the sound of a great army. So they said to one another, behold, the king of Israel has hired against us the kings of the Hittites and the kings of Egypt to come up against us. So, the Syrians were, much stronger than the Israelites, but they hear such a noise that they're like, oh, they've got the Hittites and the Egyptians and others with them to come and take us on. And so they fled away in the twilight and abandoned their tents. So they were so terrified, they abandoned their tents, their horses, and their donkeys, leaving the camp as it was, and fled for their lives. There was nothing there. God just created this noise in their head. And when the lepers, like I say, I like these lepers, came to the edge of the camp, they went into a tent and ate, drank. They were starving. It's like, oh, we'll eat and drink, man. This is good. And they carried off silver and gold and clothing and went and hid them. Then they came back and entered another tent, carried off things, and went and hid them. Now, they have no knowledge. So God has said that's what happened. But these lepers, they don't have a clue why this is empty. It's kind of odd. And so they said, wonder, we are not doing right. This day is of good news. If we're silent and wait till the morning light, punishment will overtake us. Now therefore come, let us go and tell the king's household. So they came, called the gatekeepers of the city, and told them, we came to the camp of the Syrians, and behold, there was no one to be seen or heard there. Nothing but the horses tied, and the donkeys tied, and the tents as they were. Then the gatekeepers called out, and it was told within the king's household. Now, it would be likely the king's will be a little skeptical of this. But the king rose in the night and said to his servants, I will tell you what the Syrians have done to us. They know that we are hungry. Therefore, they have gone out to the camp to hide themselves in the open country, thinking while they come out of the city, we shall take them alive and go into the city. And one of his servants said, let some men take 5 of the remaining horses, and seeing that those who are left here will fare like the whole multitude of Israel, who have already perished, let us send and see. So they're going to send 5 people and just kind of see, if they get killed, well, we're going to die anyway, kind of like the way the lepers were thinking. So they took 2 horsemen, and the king sent them after the army of the Syrians, saying, go and see. So they went after them as far as the Jordan, and behold, all was littered with garments and equipment that the Syrians had thrown away in their haste. So they even got rid of their armor as they're running away so they can run faster. And the messenger returned to the king. Then the people went out and plundered the camp of Syrians. So a seah of fine flour was sold for a shekel, just as Elisha said, and 2 seahs of barley for a shekel, according to the word of the Lord. Now the king had appointed the captain, on whose hand he leaned, to have charge of the gate. And the people trampled him in the gate, so that he died, as the man of God said when he came down. When the man of God had said to the king, 2 seahs of flour shall be sold for shekel, and a seah of fine flour for shekel, about this time the gate of Samaria, the captain had answered the man of God, if the Lord himself should make the windows of heavens could such a thing be? And he said, "You shall see it with your own eyes, but ye shall not eat of it." And so it happened to him, for the people trampled him in the gate, and he died. So word gets out. There's food in Samaria, cheap, and it's kind of like a, Black Friday at your Walmart or somewhere. I've done that once or twice, and I don't think I want to do it again. It's just like nothing can be that good of a deal. It's unbelievable, and it's just such a crowd, and so the captain was in charge of implementing this, and he's at the gate, and they just barge through and they trample him to death as he has seen what it's selling for. So, what good news for him. But I do find it humorous the way God works sometimes, is it not? Uh, you know, uh, who says God doesn't have a sense of humor? To me, this is rather comical the way this is done. They come to, first of all, earlier the army of Syria came to get, or some of them had come to get the chariots and horses, Elisha, and he blinds them and leads them into Samaria, and then lets them see again, and they're all captured. But instead of them dying, they get a feast. They leave, and those people don't come back again. But then later on, Ben Hadad, he's like, "I must sin. We're going to take the whole city of Samaria." And well, God didn't really do anything. Just they heard noises and they all fled. Fled so much they didn't even take the horses and anything. They just got rid of their armor and ran back home. And these lepers, what an interesting story. Had the lepers not done what they did, the food would probably rotted. And so they went, they saw it. They come to the gate. They was afraid they might come back too. So they took it and hid some of it, ate and drank, took some more, and then they said, "Hey, this is good news. Let's share some of this." So they went told in Samaria, and so king sent a few and found out it was true, and then they took it all into Samaria, and indeed, like the man of God had said. Isn't that how it is? A lot of times we blame God when things are bad, but this was all due to God's grace that this was done. Um, and it's interesting that a lot of times we don't give God the credit when things are good. And even when things are bad, usually there's something to be thankful for. So next week we'll get into the chapter 8 when, the famine and everything's going to end. And in the next couple of weeks, we'll be back to Judah. We'll get to that inner dynamic of the northern and southern kingdoms and how that plays out. Um, any thoughts? Any thoughts at all? Mhm. Why would God even bother with Samaria at this time, though? Obviously, there were still some that were faithful, but I find it interesting that King wanted to kill Elisha, and God took care of that. Now, I find it interesting. I think it was you or me. Uh, this guy named Sean Gupton. If you're listening, Sean, good. I think he's living in Arizona now. But anyway, when I was in North Carolina, he would teach Bible class. He was a good Bible teacher. His dad was a preacher somewhere in Texas. And anyway, uh, he was talking about the power of God, how he can, like Nadab and Abihu struck him down with fire. He's able to kill people just like that at times he did. And he put out this hypothesis. What if you had the power of God? And of course, this is the Charlotte area, and it's booming during this time, still is. And traffic on the interstate there, that from like the Huntersville area to Charlotte, all in Mecklenburg County, it was just horrendous. You get on the interstate, you'd sit, and he said, if I'm driving to work downtown Charlotte. Somebody cuts me off traffic, everything. I had the power guy. I believe I just sent a lightning bolt to strike them dead. Ever thought about, we talk about the long suffering of God. If it was us, we just struck Ben Hadad dead. We've just struck Jehoram dead. I mean, all these people that were against God's people, we just lightning bolts would be flying, killing people left and right. But that's not how God operated. Even in the Old Testament, when people thought that's what God did. And so these people from Syria and other places, they would hear of God and of His might. And some of those people may even, have become believers in God. And so we see this over and over, the way God works. He is a long suffering God. Now there are times that God did do swift action, and it was warranted. I mean, otherwise you're doubting God. But that's not how God generally operates. He operates as a long suffering person, and He doesn't treat. Typically, like you say, you have a dog you're trying to train. A dog does something wrong. Yeah, you generally deal with it right then, and either the dog has some type of punishment, or you get a rebuke, or something to where he knows don't do that behavior anymore. God don't treat us like dogs, does He? Now He allows things to happen that we should do double take sometimes, but God allows us to choose what we want. And sometimes we, as Paul did, kick against the goads. But, I think it's fascinating that God allows us the free will to do good, bad. And He gives us time to understand His ways instead of just striking us down. Uh, you know, all of us have children. And I dare say your children at some point have done something that's disappointed you. They've done something that you didn't like. It was wrong. They may have got some discipline, but you didn't think about, well, let's see, where's my gun? This one I'm just gonna get rid of. He's not gonna be that good. I'll just get rid of that one. Maybe this will do better if he sees what I'm willing to do. But we don't do that, do we? Well, we love them. We want them to learn. We want them to grow. And at some point, we realize that you can't make someone, especially once they get in them adult years, you can't make someone do what you want them to do. And those are difficult times. A lot of kids, they lose their minds when they're about 18, 19 years old, and they don't get it back to about 25 sometimes. It's tough, though. We've got some people at church that are dealing with some of those type issues, but you know, you hope if they've been trained right, they'll come back. And most of the time they do. Most of the time they do. But some of it depends on how we handle it. So we show a lot of times we're not as long suffering as God. We want things changed right now. God waited for thousands of years as these Israelites went through all this mess, and the Jews did all they did, and then He sent His Son. So anyway, good to be here next week. Same time, same channel.